Welcome to the Nerdy 30s. To celebrate Women's History Month, I had the honor of sitting down to talk to Jessica and Kaitlyn of the Culbertson Mansion about their upcoming event that highlights the remarkable and progressive women who lived and worked at the mansion. The event is on March 24th, and it goes from 1 to 3 p.m. So in this episode, you'll hear a sneak peek about what you will experience and learn at this event.
The Nerdy 30s, the podcast that proves you don't have to give up what you love at any certain age.
Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure, my name is Jessica Stavros. I am the Southeast Regional Director for the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, commonly known as Director of the Culbertson Mansion.
My name is Kaitlyn Tisdale. I am the program developer here at the Culbertson Mansion, so I get to create all sorts of fun things to bring people in.
Now, I went on a tour here like 6 months ago, and Kaitlyn was my tour guide, and she said some of the coolest things that just made me want to come back and talk to you guys a little bit more in depth about all of this, especially with tour that you're going to be doing, the Remarkable Women's Tour. First of all, with it being Women's History Month, you guys have a predominantly female staff. What is that like?
Well, we all tell each other how cute we look when we come in first thing in the morning.
Perfect.
Honestly, the museum field in general has, I feel like a majority of female workers. Our organization, the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, we have a lot of site managers that are female and leadership that's predominantly female. Regardless of our gender, I do have to say that the field and the mansion itself, we're all very well educated.
Absolutely.
And we're all very good with people. So public relations or customer service, I think that's just kind of part of, even to the Culbertsons' time until now, women are generally pretty hospitable.
Yeah.
So the business of what we do, being visitor serving organizations, we invite people to come in to have engaging, unique experiences, and hopefully they'll want to come back. Like you said, we highly encourage people to visit and then come back again in a way that makes them want to be a part of what we do. So I think it's about being smart and inviting and hospitable, and also, just kind of being the lady of the house, being a hostess.
Yeah, well, and, working in a corporation that is predominantly female, I think is just so inspiring to really see women lift each other up rather than tear each other down, which is what we see a lot of. But that doesn't really occur in this workplace. And in the Indiana State Museum and Historic Site system as a whole, everyone is so supportive of each other, and that's just refreshing to have that in your daily work routine. It's awesome.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, no jokes. So what specifically do each of your positions do?
Well, on the daily basis, I manage this site, the Culbertson Mansion. But my work for our organization, for our statewide system, as the Southeast Regional Director, I manage the operations of Corydon Capitol State Historic Site, Culbertson Mansion, and Lanier Mansion State Historic Site in Madison. So we are the Southeast region, and I make sure to direct the mission and the vision of our leadership at the Indiana State Museum and make sure that those directives and strategies are implemented in this region in all three sites. On the daily at the Culbertson Mansion, it could be answering the door, to give tours, to meeting with people in the community, whether they are our neighbors or our elected leaders, the mayor's office, municipal government. We're very close with our state representatives, Floyd County historians, our state senators. We're very involved in our community, so we will often have to leave the house to meet with folks about one program or initiative or another. So we like to make sure that on a daily basis we connect with our community in some way, whether they walk in the house or we walk out of it. We always try to spend some time learning something new. It's very important that we continue research, especially about the Culbertsons, because nothing has been written on them. Not a lot of research has been done on them. Pretty much everything on the internet is incorrect about them or exaggerated. So we are doing a lot of historical research and adding to the body of knowledge for the work that we do. And then we also have to care for the house.
Right.
So, we'll have to dust or take out the trash or
Clean the bathrooms.
It's like your own house.
Yeah. Well, I always say, as the lady of the house, sometimes you're the missus and sometimes you're the maid.
Right.
It takes a lot to make sure that this house runs smoothly, that the air conditioning or the filters or, whatever. It's just the management of a historical house museum. So, in a nutshell, that's what I do. Kaitlyn also does all of those things, but differently.
Very big nutshell.
Yeah.
For me, my day-to-day it's much more site-oriented, so I focus mostly on Culbertson. I'm the one that designs all of our programming and tries to see that through and make sure everything goes smoothly as far as designing them, marketing for them, and having them, and just having people in the house and making sure they have fun. But I give a lot of tours day to day. I run all of the field trips. I take care of all of the rentals. So I do a lot of different things daily, but mainly it's anything that brings people into this house. That's part of my job.
You coordinate so many different aspects of one thing. So if our Remarkable Women program, not only did she design the discussion, but also coordinates the catering and the marketing for it, and making sure the ticket sales are in, and making sure there are no rentals around it. People also use the house quite a bit, so they'll rent our space here. So she takes. I'm in awe of how much you do to see how much is the entire encompass. I'm a big idea person, and she handles logistics. So we complement each other really well on the day-to-day.
That's wonderful.
She sees the forest, I see the trees.
I like that. I like that a lot. And that's nice, because in my own experience of working with mainly just women, it is usually a lot of multitaskers that come together to create one big thing.
I always say I'm a hat model. I wear many hats and look good doing it.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah, you have to. I think we're a great pair and a good complement, and we teach the other girls, the staff, to be the same way. Be comfortable in what your strengths are. We are not trying to make them better at what they're not good at, while we can always give them tips for improvement.
Right.
What we really focus on are each person's individual strengths and how to make that strength work the best for us.
That's wonderful. That's really nice. Now, you mentioned this a couple minutes ago, Jessica, the information that you're trying to find about the Culbertsons. Where is it that you are getting it? How do you find it? Is it a lot of genealogy type things, or have you found diaries, or?
Sure, this is a really great question. I'm glad you bring it up, because the thing that makes historians different from other skill sets is that we are taught to search and find sources.
Right.
And then we have to analyze and interpret those sources as a means to find a new viewpoint or perspective that adds to the body of knowledge. We always want to learn something new or bring forth a new perspective based on the sources and the evidence that we find. It's like forensics, but for history.
Right.
So this skill is taught to us as we get our education. The skill is taught to us. So our main sources of information can be primary resources like family letters, of which we have many, and then diaries.
We have a couple.
Yeah. We can also look in newspaper accounts, books about the Victorian time period, the New Albany history, any kind of ephemera like pamphlets or advertisements. Also scholarly resources like academic journals, articles or magazines that have been produced through historical organizations, and then fellow history places like the Carnegie Center or the Filson Historical or the Fraser Museum or the Indiana State Museum. So we take all of these things and kind of look at them and determine, was there bias here? You know, newspaper accounts are really hard because they're like something people don't really realize. You know, Victorians were really good at Photoshop.
Right.
They were really good at fake news. You know, their newspapers were like over-exaggerated Facebook status updates. So you have to really be able to understand the implicit bias you carry within you.
Right.
But also who was that person? What were they going through? What context was happening at the same time? And you really just have to take about 10 different perspectives and paint a picture. And this is all analysis and interpretation.
Right. Well, and for me, when I came here a little over a year ago, I came from a genealogical and archives background. And one thing that a genealogist is always taught is never trust anyone else's work. So what I did was, you know, I went through and did it all again.
Right.
And really you use those census records, city directories, birth and death records. And so interestingly, you know, I noticed no one has done anything on Mr. Culbertson's parents and grandparents and his genealogy. And so then there's this whole new pool of resources that you can dig from. You know, so it's all about being your own little private detective.
Right.
And for that was a lot of web searching for the records in York County, Pennsylvania. And
you know what's so awesome about this? I just have to brag on Kaitlyn for a second. It's because there have been a couple times where someone has gone, wait, how come we don't know this yet? And then they look into it.
Yeah.
And not only do they find a new perspective that we didn't know before, but it always informs us about something we already knew before. For example, she looks into Mr. Culbertson's father. Long story short, finds out he, at the time of his death, was extremely in debt.
Ooh.
And the path that William Culbertson took due to the death of his father and the debt that he was in, being placed in the guardianship of a millionaire dry goods merchant.
Yeah.
That's exactly who he became. This explains why he was so harsh on loans and credit when he was president of New Albany's bank.
Right, because he saw what it could do.
Absolutely. And so we knew these things about him as the bank president. Like, how is this guy so benevolent but so mean when it comes to bank loans?
Yeah.
That helped us understand the possibilities of what man he was.
Right.
Mrs. Culbertson had a diary that people didn't really pay too much attention to because it happened in her life before she came to the mansion. But once we took fresh eyes at it and learned a new piece of information about her, not only did it make the diary make complete sense to us, but it also informed us on the life of her daughter and the choices that her daughter made when we knew that her daughter had her mother's diary. So it really just, looking into these things gives us an opportunity to zoom out and see these people as people.
Yeah.
And then share the stories in a way.
There are ways to see their personalities through these documents that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise.
Yeah.
But if we don't have this if we have the information, it doesn't matter if we don't share it.
Right.
So our job is to find ways to use the resources within our statewide system to share it with the people of Indiana and say, this is your history and this is amazing.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it in a way that you're going to have fun and you're going to want to come back.
Absolutely. And you guys did it. That's why I'm here.
Yes.
So how does it feel whenever you find like those new little tidbits? Because I know me, I do genealogy. So when I find like the smallest little tidbit, I get so, I'm going to say obsessive. I get obsessive with it.
Oh, yeah.
It's
You're
a
a
rush.
Where I have
You
to
sound like
finish
you're a
it.
history nerd like us, Erin.
I totally am.
It's a rush, for sure.
You know
Yeah.
my favorite part about yes, we are like instantly on the phone. we
Million
added
text
into
messages.
the tour, you know. But one of my favorite parts about that is being able to share it with the Culbertson descendants.
Absolutely.
We are in touch with let's see, 4 lines of descendants.
That is so cool.
Who are regular people here today. There are some folks that we know that have never been here.
Yeah.
And they visited here for the first time, and they're, 30 years old, and that I had no idea this is who I come from.
Yeah.
And when we find out things like, I don't know, Mr. Culbertson being a fundraiser for the Statue of Liberty Enlightening the World, or
That's her full name.
That's her full name.
I love it.
We didn't know that
didn't know that
until
either.
this research.
That's fascinating.
I went to the Statue of Liberty Museum in New York last summer, and they didn't know that. The people that
Really?
work there that sell the tickets and had no idea that was her
They
name
need
either.
to start getting on the research.
So it's
on our
it's
level.
being like we get the rush, but it doesn't matter if we don't share it.
Right.
We have to share it with people, and
Absolutely.
it just brings the context of everything that we do as people
Yeah.
in our communities today more important.
Yeah. I mean, not only does it help the actual descendants of the Culbertson, but it helps in this society in New Albany to
Absolutely.
understand what their town was like and to see where it's come from.
That is one of the most amazing things about this house. We have both worked in several other historical organizations. I have never seen a historical site more integrated into multiple generations of a community.
Yeah.
When this house in the 1940s, it was an American Legion post. So we have seen umpteen photographs of everyone in town's grandparents married here.
Oh, wow.
So grandma was married here, and here's the pictures. And then once we opened as a museum in 1964, we have been taking the 3rd grade for field trips.
I came.
So since 1964, everyone has been coming here on their 3rd grade field trip. It's like,
Right.
you're from New Albany if you went to the Culbertson Mansion in 3rd grade. And then we add to that, for 35 years, we have the longest running haunted house in the region.
Yeah, you do.
So it's all also like everybody's first haunt.
Mm-hmm.
So since the 40s, for parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and to the kids that are born today, you cannot find a person in New Albany that doesn't have a connection to this house.
Absolutely.
And it's really amazing to be a genuine resource to the people of this town. That not only are they comfortable and they trust that this is a place that they know,
Yeah.
but that they will bring their families and their families and their families.
So nice.
It's just interesting because I think a very large philosophy that we have here for all of our staff is no matter what, people matter.
Right.
And anybody that rings the doorbell, they matter. And we
Right.
want them to know that. And what they want as far as what we can offer them, we're so open to hearing that. And, we hear things on tours. You have a lot of really incredible women here. Well, you should do something where you can learn more about it. Boom, here we go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
That
Ask and you
people
shall
matter.
receive.
As Mr. Culbertson said, humanity demands we care for people.
Oh, I love that.
So if we are going to do the good work and continue his legacy in a community that he believed in, then humanity demands that we care for people. And the way that we can is to provide enriching, unique experiences that make them help form their identity, their heritage,
Right.
and help guide them to what path they're going to be on in the future. We're always trying to inspire people to be benevolent and do the right thing by their neighbors and their friends. And, we always tell kids, we don't want you to grow up and move.
Right.
We want you to stay here and help invest in this place because it's the best place to be. So
Yeah.
that's the message that people get when they come here. Words like honor and character might be historical, but it's part of our mission, so we're trying to bring them back.
I love that. I love that. And people don't understand the trickle-down effect, that your ancestors have on you.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like you were saying
That's
with
a great way to put it.
the Culbertsons' grandparents, that trickle-down effect, that's what made him who he was. And that's what, my grandfather made me who I was on some level,
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this history is so important on so many different levels. And that's why I wanted to be here, because
Yeah.
it's important for people to hear about and to understand. Now, for people to understand, like when we're talking about the Remarkable Women's Tour, I feel like we need to start with just the Culbertsons.
Sure.
So that people can have an understanding of where these remarkable women come from.
Okay.
So talk to me about the Culbertsons.
So I guess we'll start with Mrs. Well, you can't start with Mrs. without Mr. So I really feel like this is the family themselves were very progressive in their ideals at a time when the accepted order of things was period, the end of sentence.
Right.
Mr. Culbertson's experience with his parents, the fact that his mother did not have the right to her own children, and that was, standard, that when he was called an orphan when his father died, but his mother was very much alive.
Right.
The children had to have legal guardians. I think that had a lot to do with it. Also,
Now, why would they do that? Do you know specifically why?
Yeah, women technically had no legal right over their children until 1904.
Oh my gosh.
So immediately when the father of a household died, the mother would have to petition the state, or in their case a commonwealth, to appoint legal guardians that were male for those children that could make any decisions regarding their welfare, their education, their finances, anything like that had to be done by their male guardian rather than their mother.
Oh, wow.
there were also major restrictions on owning property, working and earning a wage.
Right.
And a lot of these things were different depending on whether you were born in the United States or born in Ireland,
Right.
or born in the North or the South, or as a person of means or as a person of color. So women's rights basically were just far less back then.
Right.
Now, as Mr. Culbertson aged and he met Cornelia, who was his second wife, Nellie, as he called her, she called her nickname.
It's cute.
That's what we typically call her, too.
Yeah.
It's Nellie.
Nellie had also been widowed, or was a widow, and not only had she lost her husband, but her children to disease. So she was living in a boarding house, which was incredibly shameful for a white American woman that came from a family of means.
Yeah.
And she was forced to work to feed herself. For shame, right. And she was teaching Sunday school and French lessons. And so when they met, we believe they met through the Presbyterian Church. When they met, this house, the Culbertson Mansion, was considered her wedding present. And they really were starting a new life together.
Oh, absolutely.
She is actually credited with the design of this building.
Really?
There has never been a listed architect. There were only builders. And we found a document that said Mrs. Culbertson is credited with the design, and she worked with the builders in order to create the structure. So,
That's cool.
and it's design, it's Second Empire architecture. There's a man in Washington, D.C. who's kind of the nerd on Second Empire. I don't know. I mean, he's a professional historian, but this is his forte. He credits the Culbertson as one of the only very rare and unique buildings that is the true French version of Second Empire architecture.
Yeah.
There's Americanized version, but this one has the true French influences. And we also know that Cornelia loved anything French. She was obsessed with France. So they're already very progressive in their views that Mr. Culbertson believes that women should be able to participate in the system of living.
Yeah.
Being able to buy and own and sell property, having the rights to your children, being able to be a responsible, productive citizen.
Right.
That women should have the ability to do that. He and Cornelia and his subsequent wife, Rebecca, his third wife after Nellie's death, they were very involved in suffrage ideals. Mr. Culbertson created the Primary Committee for Women's Suffrage
Oh, wow.
in 1880.
He was a proponent of that movement that early. In 1880, he invited well-known Hoosier suffragettes Helen Guger and Zerelda Wallace here to New Albany to stay here in the mansion, to speak to the churches here in town.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a very progressive man, like Jessica said, in a time where being progressive wasn't necessarily accepted.
Right.
And those ideas, of course, they translate to his wives, to his children.
And his daughters especially.
Yeah.
So the Culbertson women, starting with the Mrs., whether it's Cornelia Culbertson, who we call Mrs. Culbertson II, or Rebecca Culbertson, Mrs. Culbertson III, they were activists, leaders in the community.
Yeah.
They headed up orphanages, book clubs, cooking clubs.
Women's literary societies.
Yeah, they were constantly hosting meetings, traveling to meetings, whether it was in Louisville or Indianapolis or Minneapolis. They were really active in their pursuit of social betterment causes, getting children off the streets and out of factories, environmental laws, suffrage, working conditions. They were part of this women's movement that suffrage was happening at the same time. They were like off the shelf and out in the streets doing good work to make their
wanted better
communities
lives for everybody.
Absolutely.
He had a type.
Sounds like it.
I've never heard you say that before. I like that.
He liked strong women.
Well, I mean, somebody that is progressive like that at that time period would have looked for that.
But the basis of that philosophy is really that women should be able to have a skill so that they don't have to depend on men, whether they're brothers or sons or husbands or fathers or uncles or wherever.
And that probably has a lot to do with him being listed as orphan.
Yes. Well, he ran a widow's home,
Yeah.
the Culbertson widow's home down the street. So this whole purpose, what the philosophy was to be a productive, responsible citizen that takes a place of leadership or responsibility within a community.
Yeah.
It wasn't just to be arm candy,
Right.
as many Gilded Age wives were. It was about moving forward, moving the needle forward of social, cultural, economic, political views, moving them into a new century.
Now, Mr. Culbertson himself, just so that people have an idea of the work that he was doing, how would you describe what he did and the influence that he had on New Albany?
Yikes.
It's a lot. I know it's a
big
lot.
nutshell.
What didn't he do? So when he came here to New Albany in 1835, he was a sprightly young 21-year-old. And he was working at a clerk at a dry goods company here in town. As dry goods, like we said, his guardian was a dry goods merchant. That's what he was trained in.
Dry goods is fabric, by the way.
Yes, bulk fabric, anything used to make clothing. So it could even expand into leather goods.
Or housewares. So kind of like Mr. Olson from Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, okay.
But wholesale.
Okay.
So he
would give it to the stores.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
What I tell people is that it was never anything perishable because he wouldn't want his profit to perish.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So that's how he made the majority of his money. In his retirement, like most people, he kept working.
Right.
He was president of our bank, president of the utility company, the water company.
Oh my
He built the
gosh.
K&I Bridge, widow's home, orphanage, vice president of the American Banking Association, railroad investor, really capitalist venture investment. He would invest in things that advanced the quality of life for the community. He was also very against politics. He said, I shall never engage in politics as I believe it's a dishonorable profession.
I love that.
And honor, honor was the number one thing you're trying to attain and maintain.
Yeah.
So he believed that all good work could be done as a citizen, which is through your community, or as a member of your church. And he was a Presbyterian, and they really believed in the ideas of mission and service. So when, the taxman and the sheriff were in cahoots to extort money from people during the Civil War, saying, oh, you owe $25 in taxes while your husband's away fighting at the war, the women could go to Culbertson and say, please help me. Culbertson would not only pay the $25, but then make sure the sheriff and the taxman never pulled this scam again.
That is amazing.
So his integrity was unflappable. The Culbertson name was synonymous with honor and integrity.
Yeah.
They were uncorruptible. Incorruptible. What's the word?
Incorruptible.
You couldn't get them.
Yeah.
They had a standard that all members of the family adhered to. If they were a little scandalous, they usually had to leave town for something like that. But we generally describe him, when New Albany was the largest city in Indiana, the economic and cultural capital of the state because of our location here on the Ohio River.
Yeah.
The economy was driven by New Albany, and he was its most beloved citizen.
Wow.
He was not a philanthropist. He was a benefactor. And the difference between philanthropy and benevolence is that benevolence is a virtue. Mm-hmm. Philanthropy is an action. So this virtuous kind of integrity that also managed capitalist industry was really important for the time. So that's the kind of guy he was. When somebody broke into the chicken coop out back, and this is, 1870s, maybe 1860s, 70s, he released all the chickens and said, take all the chickens. I don't care. I don't care about the chickens. If you're hungry, eat. Just don't break the slats off my coop.
Right.
So
if they had just asked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. But you got to know, everybody asked.
Yeah.
He was the richest man in the state, so
Right.
everyone was coming to the door asking.
The one thing he and the rest of the family really despised, the one thing they hated was indolence or laziness.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a man on the street that was able to work, that wasn't working, but rather begging for money, that would be something that he never would stand for. And it's easy to see that he despised that laziness when he was such a busy and hardworking man. Even in his retirement, he was busier than when he was working as a wholesaler.
He also was a proponent, activist, supporter, I don't know the right word, for who we call the outliers. He served as a character witness for African Americans who were on trial for being fugitive slaves, but he knew them to be free. I mean, we're 1 mile away from a slave state separated by the river. So this is a very dynamic place for African Americans to be. Even if they were born free, they could be snatched off the street and sold into slavery. So he set himself apart early by standing up for these people. During the 1850s, when the immigration was very high, there was a regional anti-immigration movement that culminated in 1855 with Louisville's Bloody Monday riots. So
the Irish and
the Irish and the Germans. Leading up to this, at that point, I think it's foreign merchants made up 40% of the business class. So almost half of every store was owned by an immigrant.
Yeah.
So there was a boycott on German merchants, and he, rather than follow the boycott, learned the German language in order to deal with them directly.
That's awesome.
So he earned their loyalty very early while alienating his other rich white friends who were, city councilmen and senators and congressmen and presidents, lawmakers, the people that ran things.
Right.
He would not engage. As he said, humanity demands we care for people. He didn't care if you were a Confederate or a Union. If you were a wounded soldier, he would give you the medical supplies you needed to keep going. That was what kind of man he was. That was the kind of family that he ran. The city knew it. The region knew it. And the women in his family followed in his footsteps as pioneers and supporters and benevolent improvers, really.
It's wonderful. So, with the family being so predominant in the area and being able to make these decisions for themselves on how progressive that they would be, how different would the rest of society be from them?
Oh, gosh. Well, money gets you everything.
Right.
So they had access to good, clean water. Mm-hmm. They had access to good food, luxurious food. They had oranges in the winter.
Mm-hmm. That's unheard of at that time.
Well, not in this place. They also had the ability to travel. Again, money does that for you. So they went to Yellowstone and Yosemite in the 1860s.
Mm-hmm. That's where they were in a carriage crash.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
what?
saw one of those. I forgot to tell you. I found a picture of one of those buses.
Oh, no.
See, we get all excited. I was like, the bus!
I gotta know. What happened?
But also, they took a 6-month trip from London to St. Petersburg, Russia. And every month, they wrote a letter home to the city of New Albany, and they published it in the newspaper, and about detailing what they saw along the way. And the things that they would detail were regular everyday things.
Yeah.
Not the fine silks they slept on or the kings they had lunch with, but the working man's uniform, the common person's house.
Yeah.
Statues.
Yeah,
they saw being built.
So what you're telling me is that they were bloggers.
They were totally bloggers.
A little bit.
Yeah,
They were travel
the
bloggers.
1884 travel blog, absolutely. But how it was for the rest of the community is that, I don't know, I feel like they were...
I mean, they
were
have
right
like
next...
indoor plumbing at such an odd time.
The Culbertson family was the first family in New Albany to have plumbing. His eldest son had the first house, and this house was the second house to have indoor plumbing.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
For New Albany, the majority of its citizens were, in the upper to middle classes. New Albany was a very economically stable city, particularly from its foundations as a steamboat town. So as that steamboat city, there were the construction workers, the iron welders, the captains, the crew,
the immigrant factory workers.
There were tons of factories here, so there were lots of great opportunities for employment. That's not to say there weren't any lower income neighborhoods. There certainly was an entire section of African Americans that were basically annexed in New Albany to their own part of town. So there's always going to be that huge juxtaposition, but the Culbertsons by far were the wealthiest in town.
It's also really, Kaitlyn's done a lot of research into this too, and we'd started it some years ago, and we know some things by the diaries and the letters, but it's talking about that juxtaposition. Here on our tour, as you go throughout the house, we always try to remind people of the idea of perspective. We can explain the dining room set up for formal dinner for the richest family in the state, but then we also like to interpret it, the same room, from the perspective of the domestics that worked here.
Right.
So the domestic servants at the time were predominantly immigrants, African American, and low poverty level. So these were house workers, but they also lived here, right? So, you got a pair of Irish sisters, Eliza and Maggie, fresh off the boat from New York to Philadelphia, down the river to New Albany. They have nothing, but they live in the finest house in the land for a benevolent man who is well respected. So while they don't have anything, they also live in the Culbertson Mansion. And that dining room looks completely different from their perspective. You never get to sit at that table. The amount of dishes terrifies me.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to make eye contact with the guests. You walk in and out of a room with your back to the wall, so you head down. These different cultural expectations, depending on your class, or where you're from, or what your skin looks like, or what gender you were. It varies, you know.
But that's the great thing about what we've developed with Remarkable Women is that just because they were of a completely different class and society doesn't mean they were any less remarkable.
Right.
That their stories are still just as important.
And deserve to be heard.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And it also means that they're 100 times harder to research because they were never written about in the newspapers.
Absolutely.
No one kept a diary for them.
Do they mention them in their diaries? In the Culbertson diaries?
Very few references.
There are small references in letters. They'll say, "Oh, Aunt Marianne took us here," or "Auntie did this," or "Sarah did this," and we can piece it together. It's for example, the cook was a woman named Clarissa Finley. We know by census records that her mother was born. I'm pretty sure it said a slave, but I'm not exactly sure. 1780 in Virginia, but her father was born free in Indiana. Clarissa was born free in Indiana, and we knew that she was the best cook in the city, working for the richest man in the state. But her family lived in an alley is it uptown? Somewhere in New Albany. One of the alleys up in the uptown area.
Yeah, in that neighborhood.
She had a husband and children that lived in a house.
And she lived separate from them.
And she lived and worked here. That is all we know about her. We know what kind of food she put on the table.
Yeah.
We know she and her husband are buried together in the African American cemetery. But that's all we know.
Right.
We find very few references to the Irish girls, the domestics. The gentlemen we have found who worked in other, like the DePaul household, or a lot of the rich families would hire the same servants because they had that training.
The male servants never had the same sense of loyalty that the female servants had. And the main reason that, and I've read this in several other articles, is that they had bigger aspirations than to drive a carriage. One funny story is that we had for 1 year, in I think 1880, we had a male servant here. He drove the carriage. His name was Henry La Paturelle. And
I like that name.
He the next year is no longer a servant here, but he started a fruit stand in downtown New Albany. 5 years later, he has advertisements in the paper calling himself the Fruit King of New Albany.
That is awesome.
He was
It's like Taco Steve.
Yeah, he was this major fruit dealer.
Yeah.
So these male servants, they had these aspirations, and they were here temporarily to make enough money to do what they wanted to do.
Well, in that time period, they would have been able to see themselves doing something else other than just the housework.
But they also knew where to go to make the connections. To get there. One of the women who I wish we had a photograph of, one of the women that we absolutely will talk about, she is on our daily tour, and we interpret her as a member of the family because that's truly what she was the head housemaid, Mary Ann Hopkins. And part of the point of Remarkable Women is not just to talk about the Culbertson women, but this house is still standing and is still here because of influential women from their time period until today.
Right.
Women have been caring for this house since then. Now, I'm sure they've swung a hammer or two, but you couldn't get to the Culbertsons without going through Mary Ann.
Right.
And her story is a story of true loyalty and dedication and household management. And a lot of what we know about Mary Ann comes from the end of her life, being written about as she gets sick. I'll just give you a sneak preview. Anne Culbertson was the eldest daughter. And in the Christmas season of 1883-84, Mary Ann starts to get sick. Now, imagine the popularity and the social calendar of the eldest daughter of the richest man in the state.
Right.
So Anne halts her holiday season, no social calls or parties or things, to personally care for and become the nurse to their maid.
Oh, that was going to be that was my next question. What was their relationships like, and how would it have molded how they viewed different people in society by having these servants from all these different places?
Well, we know that there were, well, Mary Ann, for example, she died here in the house. They had her funeral upstairs.
Invited the entire city to come pay their respects to her.
They said that the line to view Mary Ann wrapped the city block.
Oh, my goodness.
Everyone came to say goodbye to Mary Ann. We also have stories of maids who got caught. I think it was the Irish one. I can't remember her name. But she was walking behind Mr. Culbertson, and he whistled when he walked, and she was mocking him, kind of, making fun of him, and she got caught and immediately fired.
Oh, no!
You can't make fun of a man and still work for him. So, he did not suffer for fools.
No.
Things like, we have just different stories like that kind of pop up.
Yeah.
But we really do believe that the family had a much more holistic, humanistic view of society than many people of means.
And I think that comes from William's background. He knew it could easily have been him being a servant in someone's household.
Absolutely.
And I think he knew he had, great fortune. Of course, he had great business acumen. But I think he understood that everyone is where they are based on partially luck, partially circumstance.
Absolutely.
I also think his insistence on maintaining a strong commitment to community, especially through the church, as a Presbyterian doctrine really focuses on mission and service. And I think by maintaining that commitment to being part of the people, with a background that demands you to help them in any way that they need it. I think a lot of times money can isolate people. Political office can isolate people.
Absolutely.
The ivory tower and the penthouse and all that kind of thing, that takes you away from the humanity of where we live. And his constant dedication to the people, I think, gave the family the opportunity to stay connected to all kinds.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Now, let's get to these ladies. Let's talk about these ladies. The reason we're here.
Yes.
So, Cornelia, his wife, as just a little sneak peek of the tour, what was Cornelia's beginnings like?
Oy.
She has such a fun backstory.
Okay, we'll try to get it together. Okay, so her mother was extremely headstrong, very demanding, and she could be cruel.
Cold.
Yeah,
That's how Cornelia described her most often, was cold.
Cold. Okay. Her mother was married as a teenager to someone in their 30s. Her name was also Cornelia. They're all named Cornelia, but we're just going to call her mother. She was divorced in the 1830s. And for a woman to obtain divorce in the 1830s was not only spoke to her powers of persuasion,
Right.
But her strength and fortitude.
What was her reasoning? Do you guys know?
Abandonment.
She said he was jealous, and I think he had another woman or something.
She claimed many things, but that he was a jealous,
with a hard temper.
With a heavy-tempered man, and that he had abandoned her. She didn't cite adultery or anything like that, but she gave enough reason and was persuasive enough that she was granted this divorce.
Yeah.
Now, he ends up going to San Francisco and establishing the public school system there, and there are literally statues of him up in San Francisco now. She ended up staying in Evansville. Cornelia is from Evansville. Her mother remarried to a very wealthy man who ran a hotel and a stagecoach stop, and they had quite a bit of money. Cornelia was known as like the debutante of Evansville. And again, remember, these river towns in the early 1800s were very prosperous river towns.
That's where all the shipments would come in on the boats.
Steamboats. It's the major highway. So it's considered a big city, and she was the prettiest, best educated. She went to what we would know as college or finishing school in Ohio.
Oh, wow. That is not heard of.
Yeah, she was beautiful, kind, and educated. She was arranged to marry the family lawyer.
Who was older than her.
Much older.
By quite a bit.
Yeah, much older. However,
you can't see my face right now, but it's not a good one.
Yeah. She loved someone else. And on the day that they were to be married, generally that time period you were married in the bride's home.
Right.
So they said the trousseau was laid out on the bed. Like her wedding dress was laid out. The flowers were delivered.
The gifts were on the table.
The wedding was happening. The groom gets off the train and someone hands him a letter and says, "Your bride has eloped with another man."
Ooh.
And Cornelia, later to be Culbertson, had eloped to a very public embarrassment of the family. And her mother never quite forgave her for that.
Until she married William.
Yeah. Cornelia and her new husband run away to Madison, Indiana. He had a very hard time in business. They were very poor. The children they bore did not live. He ended up dying.
Oh, goodness.
They were destitute at times.
Yeah.
But in her diary, she would write, "Who needs money when we're millionaires in love?"
One thing that I tell every single tour about her elopement is, she did start that diary right after, and in the very first page, she writes, "How foolish would I have been to marry one man, knowing I loved another better."
Oh.
And that is just something that, even today, gives me goosebumps.
Right. I got goosebumps when you said
It's true.
But
It's true.
it just speaks to her mind, her independence, and her free thinking, and that,
She risked everything.
Right.
I mean,
was she disowned?
She was disowned by her mother.
This is why she was living in a boarding house when they all died.
Oh, goodness.
So she comes back to Evansville, fall from grace, lost everything, and very melancholy.
Oh, guaranteed.
I mean, just so sad. And she meets William and comes here. And then as his bride, as his wife, she had a great place of distinction. She and William were guests of Ulysses S. Grant at the Grand Ball in Louisville. They were very well connected.
Yeah.
She was known for her kindness and her care for children.
Right.
She was president of the orphanage. When she died, Mr. Culbertson built the Cornelia Memorial Orphans Home, which was the Floyd County Health Department on Eakin Avenue for many, many years.
Yeah.
But it was named in her honor because of her work with the children. Of the 4 children that she bore, only one survived.
Oh, goodness.
And it was Blanche, the youngest daughter, who was the only one of the Culbertson children born here in the mansion.
Another one of our remarkable women.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, no wonder she was so interested in, children's welfare.
Absolutely.
When she didn't get to have her own children live past certain ages.
And their investment in the widows.
Right.
She had become one of those people that could not subsist, could not sustain herself.
Right.
Because she had no one to care for her, because she made this choice to go with the man that she loved.
Yeah.
So
I don't think she would have changed a thing. I don't think she would have ever gone back and done it differently.
Good for her.
yeah.
She's an incredible person.
And that diary went to her daughter.
Uh-huh.
Many of Cornelia's things went to Blanche. I love that her name is Blanche.
Every time you
French
say
for
it,
white.
I think about Blanche Devereaux.
Of
from
course.
The Golden Girls.
Well, what's funny is that Cornelia loved everything French.
Right.
Blanche is a French word, and she married a man named Lee Hill French.
Oh.
And so her name became Blanche French. So anyway.
And I love that Blanche's name it means pure.
Right. White.
Sometimes it can mean white,
Yeah,
yes.
pure white.
And
Innocent.
in her adulthood, she, in New Albany, becomes known as Scandalous Blanche.
Yeah.
And
We'll get there.
yeah,
Ooh.
so her
so many
name meaning
questions.
pure and virtuous, but she really ends up doing the opposite.
Right.
Blanche grows up. She was 10 years old when her mother died.
Mm-hmm.
So she had quite a bit of time to be the baby.
Right.
And the one that lived. So she was she went to kindergarten in 1875. That's
wow.
Very early.
Now, would women be in school at that time period?
The Culbertsons were very progressive.
I know,
Remember,
right?
they wanted the girls to be educated.
Yeah, but I mean outside of them. Not really,
There was
correct?
there was a kindergarten in New Albany on Vincennes. I think the building actually still stands. It's right next to a big church on Vincennes. But yeah, kindergartens really kind of sprouted up in the 1870s, 1880s.
Yeah. They really didn't catch on till after the World's Fair of 1893, but there were little pockets of progressive early childhood education.
Because they were all female run. There were women in New Albany that, prized, educating these children and teaching them lessons early on, that they actually formed these kindergartens and then would advertise that you could bring your children here, these days, these times, and we will educate them for you.
By age 7, Blanche is living in Philadelphia at the school. She went away to boarding school. It was called the Ogontz School for Young Ladies, and it was an activist school for Indian rights.
Oh, nice.
Again, very progressive.
Yeah.
You've got white man and then men below that, and then white women and then women below that, and then African Americans or people of color. At the bottom of that whole list were the American Indians. So in 1877, that there was a school that promoted active Indian rights and educated women in order to be supporters of such things. Again, a very loud proclamation that we believe in all people. So Blanche grows up in a school that teaches service and mission, and in a household that had partners of Susan B. Anthony in it.
Right.
She was raised with suffrage ideals, and again, not just the right to vote, but the right to participate in the system as equal with men in order for their own survival.
Right.
As a young girl, now her father was much older than her. He was like nearly 60 when she was born, mid-50s. So his generation, as progressive as he was very different than her coming up in the 1870s and 80s in this Gilded Age where things are a lot more loosey-goosey. So she got involved with this guy named Lee Hill French, and she fell in love with him through her sister. She met him through her sister.
He was not widely accepted among the family. I mean, he had many strikes against him.
He had publicly ruined women on more than one occasion, and by ruined, it was in the paper.
He was called in the paper a corrupter of women.
Oh my.
Circus owner suspected of murder.
Ooh.
Just general scoundrel.
Ay, caramba.
Well, and he studied. He went to medical school.
Oh, that's not yet. That's not yet.
Oh, okay. I'm telling a secret.
So, he's a charmer, very tall, slick talker, and Mr. Culbertson did not approve. So in his will, he left trust funds to all the kids that were still alive and good.
Yeah.
He left trust funds to them that... in Blanche's stipulation, she was not allowed to marry Lee Hill French by name within 10 years of William Culbertson's death, or she would lose her $500,000 inheritance. So what do you think she did?
She was like, sorry, I'm going to marry this guy.
Who needs money when we're millionaires in love? She has this diary of her mother, right? Like, I'm going to give everything up for the man I love. She waited until Mr. Culbertson died, and she did try to stay away from him for a minute.
She goes to Europe.
Yeah, so they...
she has to go all the way to Europe.
Yeah, and the World's Fair. where they found each other again.
Oh,
and
wow.
she elopes in one day, gets on a train and comes back and elopes with Lee. So there's a 2-year legal battle, and the New York Times put her face on the front page and called her Scandalous Blanche Culbertson.
Oh, goodness.
I mean, it was a national news story. Tabloid, of course.
Right.
But
And we have dozens upon dozens of newspapers from here in New Albany about this court
court
battle.
case.
And
Which she's fighting her brothers and sisters and her stepmother, who are the executors of the estate.
Oh, man.
So,
But I mean, they're getting money. This would have been her money.
yeah.
they're trying to care for Blanche.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
okay.
she's with the scoundrel. We don't want to give too much away because we want people to come to Remarkable Women.
Right,
Yes,
absolutely.
please come.
But I do want to tell you that Blanche's life with Lee involves him becoming a gynecologist,
Which was very taboo,
a gold digger, literally,
and figuratively.
and even Hidden Valley Ranch is involved. So
It is. It truly is.
you're gonna
you
have to
guys.
come.
Hidden
You're
Valley
gonna, you're
Ranch.
gonna have to come get the details.
But it comes from a scoundrel?
I can't, like, this needs to be a movie. The Culbertson, it's like 18-part Netflix original
We're
series.
working on it. Julian
Yeah.
Fellows, if you're listening, we want you here.
Yeah, we have a location.
Awesome.
So that is how Cornelia and Blanche kind of their stories are wrapped up in each other's lives.
Right.
Because Blanche lost her mother at an early age, her actions absolutely influenced her, but also her father being so progressive and her stepmother having these meetings and these suffragettes and the money to travel.
Yeah.
Because they go to Chicago, they go to Minneapolis, they go to Paris, they spend a lot of time in New York and Philadelphia. Blanche ends up as one of New York City's leading suffragettes.
That is amazing.
She's buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Tarrytown, New York, and is well known in Westchester County as being a leader for women's rights.
Oh, that is wonderful.
That's as an old woman at the age of 50.
Yes. What?
So
We have so many other
Yeah.
remarkable women as well. I mean, we will definitely be covering some of the servants' lives here. Anne, Blanche's half-sister, who is older than her by about 13 years.
yeah, eldest daughter.
You know, she did some really wonderful things in Minneapolis. We're also going to cover Mr. Culbertson's niece, Emma, who is one of the most fascinating women.
I'm telling you what. You're not even ready for Emma.
No one's ready for Emma.
I'm so excited.
I feel bad we skipped over Anne, but like Anne was involved in maternity wards and
Right.
and children's hospitals, and she was a millionaire herself. But
That's why we're teasing it. You got to
yeah,
Right.
yeah, she did some good things. But Emma, her father lived in a house that was over by Bank Street Brew House, or like across from the Carnegie Center, right over Pearl and.
pretty
Spring
much
over there.
pretty much right where the brew house is.
The Culbertsons were known for producing plays upstairs, so
Right.
like, Emma would be the stage manager for it. So she and Anne were very close in age, so she spent a lot of time here.
Yeah.
Emma was a pioneer in women's medicine.
So cool.
She was the first woman admitted into what is now the American Medical Association.
Oh my gosh. Do you have any like diaries or anything about her experience?
No
or
diaries. She did get brought up on charges of treason.
What?
Yeah, I don't think she was the diary keeping type.
Girl was busy.
Okay. One of the things that we know about her, most of what we know about her medical work,
Yeah.
comes from, there are several books written on early cases of what we would know as lesbians. They called them inverts. And Emma Culbertson was out and living with a woman in the 1880s.
That is
in
wonderful.
Boston.
So cool.
Like,
She
what?
She
She's
is
so great.
used as an early test case. Or a test case is maybe not the
Like
right
a
word.
study?
Case study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in quotes.
Yeah, a case study of here is an example
Yeah.
of a woman of means who lived with another woman. They called them Boston marriages. I think it's funny that it actually was in Boston.
Yeah.
They are buried together. They were together 40 years, both doctors. But her work
Wonderful.
in female surgery
Yeah.
is incredible.
Because I know at that time, like, gyno stuff was...
It was a brand new field.
Yeah, there was hardly anything.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I know, we told you. It's remarkable.
Guys, you gotta come to this tour. I'm gonna go because I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah. So the event, I think it's certainly going to be developed into a tour that we do. You know, we could even do it monthly if we wanted.
Yes, definitely.
This event, it is on Sunday, March 24th, 1 to 3 p.m.
It's actually a luncheon.
Yeah, it includes a catered luncheon by Behey Catering out of Louisville. We will, during that luncheon, Jessica and I will be doing a talk with PowerPoint images of these ladies so you can see the face to go with the name.
Yeah.
And some of the work that they did.
Oh,
you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to be, after lunch is over, we're going to be taking all of the attendees on a tour of the house. So then they'll get to see some of these places where Cornelia and Blanche and Anne and Emma and the maids all lived and worked.
Yeah.
And did remarkable things.
Oh, my goodness. You guys, this is phenomenal.
You know, this happens all the time, Erin. Like, when people come here and they find out, like, what's actually been going on,
yeah,
their minds are blown.
Yeah.
And it is inspiring. Kaitlyn said that before. Like, it's inspiring to want to keep pushing the needle forward in these ways. And that's why it was important for us to include, there was a woman that worked here for like 30 years that everyone in town knew, and she was here from like 1970 to 2004 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, she was a remarkable woman that helped this house move forward in a way that nobody else has done. Her name is Jo Ellen By.
She's a great protector.
And the restoration of this house could not have been possible without her. We're also going to talk about the Queen of Halloween, who has helped us with our haunted culture and helped us for decades make sure that people come to support the house because the haunted house and all that programming all supports the restoration.
We'll mention our restoration artist, Christina Lemon. She's
the woman that puts all the paint back up on the wall. Yeah, she's
restored every single beautiful wall and ceiling in this house.
For 30 years, she's been working in this house. So there have been some truly incredible things that have happened from the moment this house was built.
Yes.
To 5 hours ago. You know what I mean? Like, there are lots of reasons for the community, and not just women. This isn't just a ladies' luncheon. We want the men of this community to come. We want the teens, the children. We want people to bring their families.
Yes.
Multi-generational. If grandparents could come in here with their grandkids and they all learn something, we do all of this as a means to inspire other people in the community to, speak out on behalf of somebody that needs it.
Yeah.
Get involved in a good cause that helps children.
Have that benevolence.
Yeah, be benevolent.
Yeah.
But also, like, don't be afraid to be a pioneer in a profession that doesn't generally accept you, you know?
Yeah, don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with failure. That's how you learn.
It doesn't take being the wealthiest family in the state in order to do these things. In the modern world, these kind of stories from our past help us make sense of where we are right now. And it's supposed to help guide us to where we need to go in the future.
100%.
History is not about yesterday. History is about tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a college professor. My very first history class said, history is cyclical. It is a cycle. You will see it repeat itself over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's one thing where it's like, you don't really believe it until you live a little bit longer and you see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's what we do, Erin.
Come to Remarkable Women.
Where can people get tickets for this?
Ooh, tickets.
Thank you.
Call us here at the mansion. It'll typically be me that answers the phone. But call us at 812-944-9600. We're happy to get you tickets that way. Or you can visit LouisvilleTickets.com and purchase them online if you're so inclined.
Yeah, we'd like to keep our ticket prices very reasonable. If you're a member of the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites, you always get a really great discount on our program tickets. It's $18 for the full luncheon, presentation, and tour.
For a member.
And then if you're not a member, it's $20. So it's an even $20 for a Saturday. Sunday afternoon. And Be Hey Catering is delicious. I guarantee you it will be really good. But
will there be gluten-free allergy options for people?
If you have any special dietary restrictions, just let us know when you purchase your tickets. Now, I will say this. We only sell 32 tickets. So it is important to get your tickets. If you're interested, don't wait until the last minute. Although we will sell them up until the day of. Because of our limited space upstairs and for going through the tour itself, we have to keep it to 32 tickets. So
we do still have plenty available, so give me a call.
Oh, you guys.
Isn't that exciting?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was such a cool interview, and it's going to be such an amazing event. I'm going to get tickets. I'm going to get my husband a ticket, too, because I think he would really enjoy it.
Yes, we actually would really enjoy having males in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than
everybody
having a man
comes
that
from
loves
a lady.
women.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that everybody comes from a lady.
Working on it.
And you know what? Like people always ask us this question, too. Like, what do I wear?
Right.
You can walk in with pajamas to a ball gown. Right. Honestly, we are open. There's no dress code.
Can I come in full Victorian gown?
You may.
It's encouraged.
Yeah, we have our own hashtag. It's called Mansion Fancy.
Oh.
So you can hashtag Mansion Fancy if you like.
I actually have an Irish lass dress.
That's fun.
Dress. I said dress because it rhymed. My mouth. But yeah, I actually have an Irish dress, and I could just wear that.
Yeah.
That's right.
You can also always stay up to date. Kaitlyn manages our Facebook page, and you have to put in Culbertson Mansion State Historic Site.
Yes.
That is a great way to keep up to date with our immediate programs, or you can check our website at indianamuseum.org. And that will not only give you information on how to become a member, which I highly recommend. If you are a member of our statewide system, then your benefits are not just at the Culbertson, they are at all 12 sites, including the Indiana State Museum and the 11 historic sites throughout the state. So visit our Facebook page or our website. If you can't make Remarkable Women, we're having Hattie Hour in May.
Gonna be a fun one.
The Blue Banquet.
What is Hattie Hour?
Oh, no, it's in April.
It's in April. Hattie Hour is a new event for us. It's something that we kind of came up with last year. It is a happy hour, but focused on having local milliners, local hat makers coming into the mansion. They'll have booths all throughout the house, and we will have a cash bar, food available. So it'll be a very small ticket price.
But that's smart because it's going to be right around Derby, too.
Right around Derby.
It's the week after Thunder that we're having it. So,
and it's encouraging people to come find that perfect topper for the Derby Day.
So whether it's Hattie Hour
smart.
Or our famous clue parties or our magic shows or our ghost tours or haunted house, I think you can see, Erin, we do fun things here.
Yes.
As we said, unique, engaging experience that make you come and come back.
I wasn't kidding when I said my job was to do fun things and bring people in here.
100%.
All based on the history of the Culbertsons and Indiana and New Albany. So there you go.
This was so amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. You guys are remarkable women.
We're on the top.
You better be on the top. You better have your own little PowerPoint slide. This is me.
I'll make one for Jessica, but not myself.
Well, no.
But you are important too.
In all the time that we've been here, we've had some really incredible ladies working here that have accomplished some really incredible things. So we are not going to brag. We'll stay humble, but
I'll brag for you.
We are the next generation of remarkable women that are making history here, and there's no shame in that.
No shame.
No, that's remarkable.
Thank you. I have to say the title of the program, remarkable women did come from a former female employee.
Really?
And this was a program that originally started in Indianapolis. The Remarkable Women would talk about all of the women at our sites, and this program happened at the State Museum. So this year we're focusing just on the Culbertson. So
that is so cool. Guys, thank you so much.
Erin, thank you so much. It means a lot that you reached out and invited us on. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you know, I see something amazing like this, and I want to make sure that people get to go and see it.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people don't realize how important and how just amazing your actual history in your own town is. They always think you have to travel hundreds of miles. Like, I have to go to Ireland to go find something cool about history. You don't need to.
And it doesn't have anything to do with names and dates.
Right. Exactly.
You don't have to memorize what year it was. You just get that feeling, and that's all you need.
Yeah. You just got to get that little brain worm in there, and you're good. Well, guys, thank you. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to our website, thenerdy30s.com. You can give us a like on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all over the place. And if you feel so inclined, please consider donating to our podcast. And if you want to hear more about these remarkable women, go to their event. Thank you for listening, you guys. Have a good day, and have a happy Women's History Month.